Celebrities give a lot of interviews, and it's rare for them to know for sure when they're giving their last one. These are the interviews that became all the more poignant after a celeb passed away.
James Dean was born in Marion, Indiana on February 8, 1931. In high school, Dean developed an interest in acting that would lead him to move to the West Coast, where he briefly studied theater at the University of California, Los Angeles, before dropping out to pursue acting. Bit parts and commercial work then led Dean to New York, where he studied under Lee Strasberg at the prestigious Actors Studio. Dean's role in the Broadway play The Immoralist caught the eye of film director Elia Kazan, who cast him in 1955's East of Eden, the only film he would live to see released. Starring roles in Giant and Rebel Without a Cause followed in quick succession. Just 13 days before Dean's death, actor Gig Young interviewed the young star on the set of Giant for the TV show Warner Brothers Presents. Dean, an avid racer, spoke with Young about safe driving and the importance of being careful on the highway, ending the piece saying,
"Take it easy driving. The life you might save might be mine."
On September 30th, 1955, Dean was killed instantly in a high-speed car crash. He was 24. Bela Blaschko was born on October 20th, 1882, in the town of Lugos in southern Hungary. Although his career on stage and in film spanned over 50 years, the man known worldwide by his stage name Bela Lugosi will forever be known for his role as Dracula in Universal Studios' 1931 adaptation of Bram Stoker's classic novel. But Lugosi revealed in 1955 that he had become addicted to morphine first prescribed to him to alleviate severe leg pains and sciatica decades before. Knowing that he would die without help, he voluntarily entered a medical facility to receive treatment for his addiction. Upon his release, a fully rehabilitated Lugosi emerged from the hospital to speak to the press for what would be the last time.
It's a terrible ordeal to go through a withdrawal. It's the greatest pain in the world.
But he said that his time in rehab was transformative.
That I became a new man, new lease of life. I'm cured.
Optimistic about his future, Lugosi looked forward to getting to work on a new picture with his friend, notorious filmmaker Edward D. Wood Jr. Just a year later, though, Lugosi suffered a fatal heart attack while resting at his modest Hollywood apartment. He was 73. Born in Iowa in 1907 as Marion Robert Morrison, John Wayne was a University of Southern California football star before a shoulder injury permanently sidelined him. Discovered by legendary director John Ford, Wayne would go on to epitomize Hollywood's image of the American cowboy in such films as Stagecoach and The Searchers. In 1964, Wayne was diagnosed with lung cancer. An operation to remove most of his left lung proved a stunning success. Yet cancer was not through with John Wayne. In January 1979, doctors discovered a malignancy in the actor's stomach. Surgeons removed Wayne's complete stomach in a 9-hour emergency procedure. Wayne gave his last interview to ABC's Barbara Walters just one day before the discovery of his stomach cancer. Looking back on his 50-year career, Wayne commented on his mortality.
And I want to hang around as long as I'm healthy and not in anybody's way.
John Wayne made a final public appearance at the April 9, 1979 Academy Awards. He died on June 11, 1979 at UCLA Medical Center, aged 72. By the time Judy Garland was in her teens, she had become one of Hollywood's biggest draws, and when she starred in the 1939 classic The Wizard of Oz, her fame only grew. Garland moved into more mature roles in the 1940s in films such as Meet Me in St. Louis, but addiction and mental illness nearly ended her career. Later in life, she transitioned to recording and stage work with a series of successful concert tours, followed by a triumphant return to film in 1954's A Star is Born. But as documented in Little Girl Lost by Al Diorio, by 1969, overwork, drug addiction, crash dieting, and a series of nervous breakdowns had taken a serious toll on Garland's health. In March of that year, she gave what would be her final interview to Radio Denmark. Sounding fatigued, Garland stated,
My career has been like a roller coaster. I'm either an enormous success or just a down-and-out failure.
When asked if she felt that she had led a rich life, Garland, recently married to fifth husband Mickey Deans, replied,
No, not until now. I think it's been an interesting life. I loved always giving performances to audiences, but I can't take the audience home with me.
3 months after this interview, Judy Garland was found dead of an accidental drug overdose in her London home at the age of 47. Immortalized in his signature role in the musical The King and I, a part he would play on Broadway over 4,000 times, Yul Brynner was an enigmatic figure. With his shaved head and powerful voice, he was an imposing presence in roles ranging from the Pharaoh Ramses in The Ten Commandments to the android gunslinger in Westworld. Yet according to his son, Rock Brynner, author of Yul, The Man Who Would Be King, the actor's greatest creation was his own persona. When Rock Brynner challenged his father about the inconsistencies he found while researching his past, the actor replied, "The facts of my life have nothing to do with the realities of my existence." Although the details of Yul Brynner's beginnings are murky, the facts of his sad last days are irrefutable. Aware that his death from lung cancer was imminent, Brynner appeared on ABC's Good Morning America on January 7, 1985. When asked by host David Hartman if there was anything he could change about his life, Brynner answered,
"If I could take back that smoking, we wouldn't be talking about any cancer. I'm convinced of that."
After Brynner's death the following October at the age of 65, his widow Kathy gave the American Cancer Society permission to use footage from the interview in a powerful anti-smoking campaign, fulfilling one of her husband's final wishes. In the PSA, Brynner looks directly into the camera and says,
"Now that I'm gone, I tell you, don't smoke."
The late Gene Wilder made a career of playing off-kilter characters. From Roald Dahl's famous Candyman Willy Wonka to the titular character in Mel Brooks' comedy classic Young Frankenstein, Wilder brought eccentric characters to life with a sensitivity rare among comic actors. Despite his fame, Wilder was a private man who rarely gave interviews. In one of his last before his death at age 83 from complications of Alzheimer's disease, he spoke with Robert Osborne of Turner Classic Movies at the 92nd Street Y about why he retired from acting. The answer? He just didn't like the kinds of movies being made.
I didn't want to do the kind of junk that I was seeing. I didn't want to do 3D, for instance.
It wasn't just the style of the films, though, but what he perceived as a new coarseness to the content that Hollywood was moving towards, citing an excessive amount of swearing in movies. Wilder also took aim at Tim Burton's take on Willy Wonka, a role Wilder made famous. Suffice it to say, Wilder was not a fan.
I think it's an insult. I don't care for that director, and he's a talented man, but I don't care for him for doing stuff like he did.
Born November 10, 1977 in Atlanta, Georgia, Brittany Murphy got her first big break in acting at age 14, playing Dabney Coleman's character's daughter on the sitcom Drexel's Class. Her supporting role as the uncool Ty Frazier in the 1995 coming-of-age comedy Clueless, however, catapulted her to international fame. Critically acclaimed roles in such films as Girl Interrupted and 8 Mile followed, as well as a long-running voice role on the animated comedy King of the Hill. But on December 20th, 2009, Murphy, 32, shockingly collapsed at her home and died from a combination of pneumonia, anemia, and intoxication of multiple over-the-counter and prescription drugs. Despite the coroner's report, her family and others would offer a number of alternate theories for her cause of death, including intentional poisoning. Appearing distracted and dazed, Brittany Murphy gave her final interview to Fox News Pop-Tarts on December 3, 2003, just over 2 weeks before her death. In the interview, she addressed her dramatic weight loss and promoted the charity Looking Beyond, which aids underprivileged children in need of medical prosthetics. She said, "I feel very blessed for everything I have in my life and my family." From biblical epics to sci-fi thrillers, Charlton Heston brought gravitas to every film he starred in. Heston's role as Moses in The Ten Commandments made him a superstar, and roles in several historical dramas, including Ben-Hur, for which he earned an Academy Award, followed. By the late 1960s and early 70s, Heston remolded himself as an action star thanks to such films as Planet of the Apes. In his later years, Heston was an outspoken advocate of conservative causes, and in 1998, he was elected president of the National Rifle Association. Heston announced that he had Alzheimer's disease in 2002. He spoke to ABC's Peter Jennings about his diagnosis later that year in his last public interview.
You have to take it as it comes. Do the best with your life you can. And what can't be cured must be endured.
Heston died on April 5, 2008, aged 84. Texas-born 80s heartthrob Patrick Swayze began his career as a professional dancer before finding success on Broadway in shows like Grease. Swayze's stage work eventually led him to Hollywood, where he scored his breakout role as Daryl Derry Curtis in Francis Ford Coppola's 1983 film adaptation of S.E. Hinton's teen novel, The Outsiders. Swayze's skills as a dancer came to the forefront in the 1987 hit Dirty Dancing, which established him as a Hollywood sex symbol. The hits Roadhouse and Point Break also scored Swayze points with action fans. Diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in 2008, Patrick Swayze spoke to Barbara Walters 8 months before his death in September 2009. Despite his declining health, Swayze was determined to beat the odds.
I want to last until they find a cure, which means I better get a fire under it.
Carrie Fisher enchanted millions as Princess Leia in the Star Wars saga and gained respect behind the scenes as a fiercely talented novelist and screenwriter with an acerbic wit. Yet, for much of her life, Fisher faced mental health issues and drug addiction, subjects she spoke about with frankness and humor. Fisher had been promoting her book, The Princess Diarist, when she appeared on The Graham Norton Show. Taped in England just a couple of weeks before she suffered a heart attack while on a flight from London to Los Angeles, Fisher spoke with humor and pathos about finding her Star Wars-era diaries. "I'd forgotten I wrote them. They were in a storage room under my bedroom, and so we brought all these things up thinking I'd put them in a book. I found these 3 diaries, and I was a little saddened by them. I'm very insecure in the books, and I didn't recall that I was that insecure." No name is as synonymous with the words movie star as Marilyn Monroe. Beloved for her vivacious personality, breathy voice, and stunning physical attributes, she made her mark in such comedies as Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and Some Like It Hot. Yet her bubbly on-screen demeanor belied a life of loneliness and depression that would fuel her successful dramatic turns in films like The Misfits, her last completed film. As documented by Biography, Marilyn Monroe was born Norma Jean Mortensen on June 1, 1926. While working in a munitions factory in Van Nuys, California, Norma Jean caught the eye of a professional photographer and launched a successful career in modeling. In 1946, she signed her first movie contract, dyed her red hair blonde, and rechristened herself Marilyn Monroe. Monroe gave what would be her final interview to Life's Richard Merriman. In the article, Monroe spoke at length about the nature of fame, saying, quote, "Everybody is always tugging at you. They'd all like sort of a chunk, somehow. They kind of like take pieces out of you. And I don't think that they realize it." The interview appeared in the August 3, 1962 issue of Life, just 2 days before Monroe's body was discovered. Monroe died of an overdose of barbiturates in what was ruled an apparent suicide.
The last 12 months of Tupac Shakur's life were tumultuous, to say the least. The rapper, poet, and actor had served 9 months of a 1.5-year sentence at Clinton Correctional Facility starting on Valentine's Day 1995. At the same time, Shakur's feud with the East Coast scene, and rapper the Notorious B.I.G. in particular, was escalating. Amid all this upheaval, Shakur was planning to release an autobiography chronicling his highly eventful life. He enlisted the writer Rob Marriott, who met Shakur for interviews. In the interview, Shakur talked about his beef with Biggie and settled the score on his time in prison. A Vibe article had previously claimed that Shakur was in danger for his life behind bars, but the rapper was keen to tell the world that he had been treated with respect. Shakur was shot and killed in a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas on September 13, 1996. He was seated in a parked car with Suge Knight, the manager of his record label and the man who had posted his $1.4 million bail. Excerpts from Shakur's final interview were released in 1997 on a bonus disc accompanying the posthumously released Thug Immortal documentary. There can be no discussion about Tupac Shakur's tragic end without also mentioning that of his bitter rival, the Notorious B.I.G., who was shot and killed in a close-to-identical drive-by shooting just 6 months later. Biggie's final interview took place on February 24, 1997, just 2 weeks before his death, on the set of the music video for Hypnotize. Tragically, the single would become the soundtrack to the rapper's funeral. At the time, the world was eagerly awaiting Biggie's follow-up to his smash debut album Ready to Die, and the rapper discussed the scale of the forthcoming double album, Life After Death. Notably, Biggie believed the album would help him get his spot back after a period of making guest appearances and mentoring artists such as Junior Mafia. His interviewer also congratulated the rapper on the birth of his second son, CJ. At one point in the interview, Biggie appeared to regret how destructive his feud with Tupac had become.
We two individual people, we waged a coastal beef. You know what I'm saying?
Asked what he learned since his rival's death, Biggie claimed that he believed that it was his responsibility to squash the beef that had wreaked such deadly harm on the hip-hop community.
I gotta be the one to flip it and take my power and flip it like, yo, they gotta be dead, you know what I'm saying? Because he can't do that.
The former NWA star and influential West Coast hip-hop legend Eazy-E was expanding his focus in the last months of his life. As well as working on his solo material, 31-year-old Eric Wright had recently set up his own record label, Ruthless Records, and was championing a new generation of artists. However, as he discussed in his final interview with Rap Pages, recorded in January 1995, he was also embroiled in a number of disputes with several of the artists he had signed. Wright claimed that his treatment of the artists in question had been fair, however. The interview is notable for Wright's turn against his former bandmate Dr. Dre and his affiliate Snoop Dogg, with Wright claiming that, "They're not real, it's all acting." Of course, this was a bombshell claim when West Coast gangsta rap was at its peak and when authenticity was key to artistic credibility. Worse than that, though, is that Wright can be heard coughing and struggling to catch his breath in the recording. Tragically, the rapper did not know at the time that he had contracted HIV and that he would soon be in the hospital with AIDS-induced pneumonia. The rapper sent a message to fans from his deathbed warning of the dangers of the disease that was stigmatized and little understood in the general population. In his final statement, he said, "I've learned in the last week that this thing is real and it doesn't discriminate. It affects everyone." Having first made his name under the moniker Zev Love X in the early 1990s, Daniel DeMille left the rap game for 3 whole years following the death of his brother and musical partner, DJ Sabrak. He emerged with his new persona MF Doom after having spent a period of hardship living on the streets. DeMille found himself alienated from the hip-hop community after being denied re-entry to the US in 2010. He was born in London, and that is where he found himself banished in the years that followed. He still managed to release music, the most notable being 2012's JJ Doom, a collaboration with Gennaro Jarrell, as well as 2 collaborations with Inspector Dex Czarface. But the final decade of Doom's life was dominated by tragedy, specifically the death of his teenage son in 2017. DeMille's last known interview was with Spin magazine in 2019, celebrating the 15th anniversary of his acclaimed studio album Mad Villainy. In the interview, DeMille shocked his fan base by claiming that he didn't care about hip-hop and didn't listen to the genre either. He said he only wrote rhymes to get paid. He died October 31st, 2020. No cause of death was made public. Lisa Left Eye Lopez was seemingly at a crossroads in her life around the time of the tragic car accident that took her life on April 25, 2002. She had just turned 30, and the breakout star of girl group TLC was looking to assert herself in her solo career following the release of her debut album Supernova, which had performed poorly. Lopez's relationship with her TLC bandmates had become distant, and it is likely that the rapper was looking to shed her identity as a member of the group with the hope of finding greater artistic freedom. Lopez announced that her new identity was Nina, an acronym standing for New Identity Non-Applicable. The fan site TLC Army suggests that the name was chosen by Suge Knight, the notorious owner of Death Row Records who had been in the car with Tupac Shakur when the rapper was shot. Lopez had recently signed to his new label, Tha Row Records, for whom she was recording her second album. In her last television appearance, Lopez is seen seated with Knight, claiming that her new label was a family with a lot of love. Referring to Lopez as Nina, the interviewer asks whether there is still a left eye, to which the star responds,
Left Eye is in TLC. Anything outside of Left Eye, outside of TLC, would be Nina.
Phife Dawg was a member of a tribe called Quest, and his signature flow played an integral part to their best-loved records. Born Malik Isaac Taylor, the rapper had finally reconnected in the studio with fellow tribe artists Q-Tip, Ali, and Jerobi for what ended up being We Got It From Here, Thank You For Your Service, the tribe's first album for 18 years. Sadly, it turned out to be a posthumous release for Phife, who died of complications from diabetes in March 2016, 6 months before the album's release. Taylor's final interview took place in November 2015. The interview was notable for the rapper's frustration at the tribe's lack of public appearances, following Q-Tip's assertion that the group's performances opening for Kanye West the previous year would be their farewell shows. He told Rolling Stone, "I think it is ludicrous that we are not performing together." Taylor also discussed his lack of confidence in the early days and his dislike of his own voice. He also spoke about his health, saying, "I'm in a good spot, but I have my good days and I have my bad days. And that is another reason why it is ludicrous for us not to be performing right now and smelling these roses while we're still here." Ermias Asghedom, aka Nipsey Hussle, was shot and killed outside his Marathon clothing store in Los Angeles on March 31, 2019. He was 33, and his star had been rising prior to his death. A series of well-received mixtapes behind him and a Grammy nomination for his debut studio album Victory Lap had made Asghedom an established name in contemporary hip-hop. But what really struck fans after news of his death was announced was Asghedom's role in various charities and community projects. According to a USA Today article released the day after his death, Asghedom had been actively trying to broker peace and bridge the gap between rival gangs for years. uniting his Crip Blue with Blood Gang rappers YG and The Game, known by the color red. The final interview of Oskedum's life was undertaken by his longtime partner, the actress Lauren London, whom the rapper had been dating since 2013, and who was the mother of one of his 2 children. It took the form of a 30 questions couple quiz for GQ. Evidence of the couple's great emotional bond, the footage makes for tragic viewing with the knowledge of Oskedum's death and London's impending loss.
What did I think of you the first time we met?
She was head over heels sprung from day one.
And he got this wrong.
We met, you know what I'm saying?
Despite his numerous solo accomplishments, Keith Guru Elam's name will forever be most closely associated with that of his breakthrough partnership with DJ Premier Gangstar. But towards the end of his short life, the rapper was seeking to distance himself from his former partner and promote his working relationship with his new partner, MC Solar. This is evidenced by his final interview, undertaken by All Hip Hop, in which Elam claimed, "People ask me about my ex-DJ and all that. We were never all that close. We hooked up in the studio and did great music, but we were never hanging and all that cool. Solar and I, we got tight before we even started doing music." Elam died from blood cancer on February 28, 2010, aged just 47. The interview foreshadowed much of the tension that would surround the classic rapper's death and the behavior of Solar, who became a villain in the community following rumors suggesting that he had isolated Elam. Solar also came under suspicion after the release of the following message purportedly written by Elam on his deathbed, which read, "I had nothing to do with him in life for over 7 years and want nothing to do with him in death. Solar has my life story and is well informed on my family situation, as well as the real reason for separating from my ex-DJ." Elam's friends and family questioned the authenticity of this message and suggested it had instead been written by Solar. The true nature of Solar's relationship with Elam has never quite been settled. The chaos surrounding rapper and Wu-Tang Clan founder Old Dirty Bastard, born Russell Jones, had come to eclipse his music in his final years. This was despite 2 well-received studio albums and a number of minor hit singles. By the time of 35-year-old Jones's tragic death by an accidental overdose in November 2004, the rapper had long been generating headlines as hip-hop's folk hero.
All that afraid of the government stuff, you know what I'm saying? That's dead in my life, man, because I got special things to put on people.
Jones had at one time been on the run from the police, who were pursuing him for a number of different misdemeanors, including shoplifting and drug possession. He had also managed to secretly attend recording sessions and appear at live concerts, all while avoiding arrest. Jones eventually took a deal and received a minimal sentence, although the prison time reportedly had an adverse effect on the rapper's mental health, and his drug addiction spiraled out of control. However, in what is thought to be his final radio interview, the recently released Jones explains that he was looking forward to making more hits, and said he considered the whole Wu-Tang Clan family. In 2017, Jones's cousin and fellow Clan member RZA gave an interview saying he wished that he, his fellow Clan members, and his family had done more to help Jones, and that he believed the rapper's death was preventable. At the turn of the millennium, Christopher Big Punisher Rios had completed his transformation from respected but little-known underground rapper to full-blown rap icon. Still only 28, the MC had made a splash collaborating with Fat Joe in 1995, while his 1998 debut studio album Capital Punishment peaked at number 5 on the Billboard 200 charts and number 1 on the top R&B albums chart for 2 weeks. He'd also been nominated for a Grammy and was the first Latinx hip-hop artist to go platinum. In 2000, Rios was reaching new audiences following a collaboration with Jennifer Lopez on her single Feeling So Good. To promote the single, Rios was due to perform alongside Lopez on Saturday Night Live, but canceled after becoming breathless and subsequently died of a heart attack in his New York hotel room, where he was staying with his wife and children. Rios' final interview was for a cover feature in Industry Insider magazine, and the interview was notable for Rios' ill health, his difficulty speaking, and the interviewer's subsequent difficulty transcribing what Rios had said. The same source also notes that Rios' management had sent the magazine promotional shots for the cover, which were rejected due to Rios' sickly appearance. Sadly, no one suspected that the young rapper was so seriously ill. Real name Albert Johnson, Mobb Deep's prodigy, had long been open about suffering from sickle cell anemia, which had affected him throughout his life. He was in the hospital being treated for the illness when he died on June 20, 2017. The cause of death was mistakenly reported as accidental choking, a fact that led to Johnson's family suing the hospital and physician involved, claiming it was a case of wrongful death. The rapper was just 42. In his final interview, during an appearance on the Premium Pete Show podcast, Johnson discussed how he was first introduced to guns by his father at the age of 7. He also admitted that his touring with Mobb Deep in the late 1990s, around the time of the birth of his daughter, took a toll on his relationship with his child, but said that they had since made up for it.
We'll go to great adventures and go out to eat and cook together in the crib, or we do a lot of things together.
Better known as Lil Peep, Gustav R. was a prominent face among the new wave of rappers emerging through the SoundCloud rap scene at the end of the 2010s. His life and career were cut short, however, when he died suddenly on November 15, 2017, following a drug overdose. He was just 21, but in just a few years, he had become one of the most talked about and contentious figures in hip-hop. Paper Magazine released what they billed as the rapper's last interview the day after his death, calling him one of music's brightest lights and an all-around magical human being. In the interview, R expressed how much he enjoys touring and said that he had recently started taking himself and his career seriously after evolving from a mixtape artist to a commercial prospect. He was also thinking about his future as an artist, saying, "I want to go deep into fashion. I want to go maybe into acting. There's a lot of stuff I would like to go into. I want to do a lot of different things and dive into different worlds. I feel like I'm a creative and I want to take advantage of that." 20-year-old Jesse Onfroy, who went by the stage name XXXTentacion, was under modified house arrest when he undertook the final interview of his life. A journalist from the Miami New Times knocked on his door after finding the rapper's address on a discarded parking ticket. The subsequent article, published the day before his death from gunshot wounds on June 5, 2018, was more of a profile than an account of what Onfroy had to say. Following the news of his death, however, Miami news website Jitney Books approached the journalist Tarpley Hitt to get a sense of her 2.5-hour-long conversation with the late rapper. Onfroy was facing up to 30 years in prison for a range of crimes that included aggravated battery of a pregnant victim, domestic battery by strangulation, false imprisonment, and witness tampering. He derided the Me Too movement in the interview, claiming that it had inflated his alleged crimes and damaged his career. But the rapper also spoke about his spirituality, saying that he read the Quran and even believed in astrology and in witches. Onfroy suggested that his ex-girlfriend had performed witchcraft, specifically money spells, which he claimed had a real-world effect. Better known as MCA, the Beastie Boys' Adam Yauch was open with his fans about his health after being diagnosed with cancer in 2009. In a statement at the time, Yauch explained, "I just need to take a little time to get this in check, and then we'll release the record and play some shows. It's a pain in the neck, because I was really looking forward to playing these shows, but the doctors have made it clear that this is not the kind of thing that can be put aside to deal with later." Yauch was optimistic about his illness, saying at the time that his condition was very treatable and telling Gothamist that he was feeling all right.
And they've caught it early and it's not anywhere else in my body, and so that's the good news.
However, 2009 also turned out to be the year of Yauch's final public performance before his death in 2012. During his illness, Yauch continued to communicate with fans via the group's online channels, and even found the energy to contribute to a new album. Prior to his death, the band discussed the new album in an interview with The Guardian. The interview was undertaken in Yauch's absence, with his bandmates explaining that Yauch was still in treatment, but that his prospects of survival looked good. Tragically, Yauch died on May 4, 2012, just hours before the article was published. His bandmates later praised Yauch's incredible optimism in an interview with Rolling Stone. There's some debate as to what exactly was the last interview given by Prince. In particular, one in-depth piece published by Ebony magazine in December 2015 was mysteriously deleted the next day, for reasons that still haven't been explained. As far as anyone can confirm, however, the last official talk with Prince by a major publication was published by The Guardian in November of that year. In this final interview, Prince laid out the concept for what would be his final tour, clarified his famous statement about the death of the internet, and unknowingly waxed prophetic by way of explaining his desire for transcendence. Prince said that he had conceived his piano and a microphone tour to challenge himself. As he explained, it would be like tying one hand behind his back, adding that, "I won't know what songs I'm going to do when I go on stage. I really won't. I won't have to because I won't have a band." He also explained that he was perfectly aware that the internet was doing fine, but that it was the ability of artists to make a living that had fallen by the wayside. To that end, he quipped, "Apple's doing pretty good though, right?" But his last sit-down left fans with one indelible image of Prince playing and singing by himself for hours, as he said he'd done the previous night. The star said, "I just couldn't stop. It was like an out-of-body experience. That's what you want, transcendence." There was never another rock star quite like Warren Zevon. His singing voice was unique, to say the least, and he wrote songs with titles such as Rollin' the Headless Thompson Gunner and Gorilla You're a Desperado. Even more amazingly, he actually made them work. During the 80s and 90s, Zevon was known to sit in as bandleader for Paul Schaefer on David Letterman's Late Show when needed, and over those years, he and Letterman developed a close friendship. When Zevon received a terminal cancer diagnosis in 2002, Letterman did something he had never done before. He blocked off his show's entire hour for one guest. The show never got sappy or sentimental, though. In fact, Zevon displayed his trademark humor by deadpanning,
"I might have made a tactical error in not going to a physician for 20 years.
He also joked that the only real adjustment he'd made was telling them to step on it at the dry cleaners. But when Letterman asked if his friend's diagnosis had given him any insights on life, Zevon turned serious long enough to deliver a truly great piece of advice.
You're reminded to enjoy every sandwich and every minute of playing with the guys and being with the kids and everything."
Zevon performed several songs throughout the hour, and it was often obvious that his illness was giving him trouble. But for the final song he ever publicly performed, at Letterman's request, he pulled out his old classic Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner, and he nailed it.
Let me just say now, thank you for being here, and thank you for everything.
If you're a Beatles fan, John Lennon's words during his final Rolling Stone interview on December 5, 1980, 3 days before his death, will shake you to your core. Lennon was coming off an extended hiatus from music, which saw him appear to genuinely become a better person and father. He just released a slew of great new songs, which later became the posthumous Grammy-winning album Double Fantasy, and he was all too excited about a future he would never get to see. Lennon spoke to the interviewer for hours, joking around and often segueing into long, fascinating anecdotes about his music, his wife Yoko Ono, the Beatles, and the troubles he had endured during the 70s. But here's the kicker. In response to a suggestion that he and Yoko should have their own late-night show, Lennon said, "We often talk about that. It might be fun, but there's time, right? Plenty of time. And it will be fun to be on the cover of Rolling Stone. It will be fun, won't it, to start 1981 like 1968? As a devotee of the Hare Krishna sect of Hinduism, George Harrison was always the most spiritual of the Beatles. And while he never got in anyone's face at an airport, he wasn't shy about expounding on the tenets of his religion. In 1997, only a month before he was diagnosed with a throat cancer that would kill him 4 years later, Harrison appeared on VH1 alongside his old friend and sitar mentor Ravi Shankar. During the interview, he shared some existential thoughts that now seem eerily prescient.
Nobody's trying to figure out what's the cause of death and what happens when you die.
Harrison also suggested that knowledge itself was the meaning of life, and he even quoted the Bible to prove his point.
Knock and the door will be opened, and it's true. If you want to know anything in this life, you just have to knock on the door.
Harrison was only 58 when he died, too young, but it could be that he had already learned all there was to know. George Michael's career beginnings as lead singer of the bubblegum pop group Wham belied his true talent as a singer and songwriter. Later Wham releases and his subsequent solo career would bear this out, as he eventually achieved the kind of respect normally reserved for pop's greatest icons. To hear him tell it, though, none of it was worth the price. In a BBC Two interview that aired shortly before his death on Christmas Day 2016, Michael said, "If I'm really honest, some entity wasn't ready to let me have a full life." He continued, "It was as though it was a choice. It was, do you find your place in life, your place with a partner or lover, or do you just carry on down this road to the next great achievement?" In the documentary George Michael Freedom, which the singer had been laboring away on mere hours before his death, he describes his life as, quote, "a waste of time, a waste of effort." His millions of fans would certainly disagree. Tom Petty broke hearts around the world when he died in 2017 at only 66, and his final interview with the Los Angeles Times is one of those that makes it so much worse. Not because he was down and out, but because he was just on top of the world. Petty led off talking about what a wonderful year it had been before bubbling over with enthusiasm for his protégés, the Shelters, then going on at length about how songwriting and studio work gave him purpose. There was no reason to think that he was anywhere near the end of the road, and yet buried within the interview was one moment of grim foreshadowing. Referring to himself and his band, the Heartbreakers, Petty said, "If one of us went down, or if one of us died, God forbid, or got sick, we're all older now, then we'd stop. I think that would be the end of it if someone couldn't do it." And if you're hoping for something a little more uplifting, Petty also reflected on his time with the Heartbreakers by saying, "It was about moving people and changing the world, and I really believed in rock and roll. I still do. I believed in it in its purest sense, its purest form. I'm just trying to get the best I can get out of it." Keith Moon of The Who was a drummer like no other. Both he and guitarist Pete Townsend appeared on Good Morning America about a month before Moon's death from an overdose. And if you know anything at all about Moon, his words and general disposition will not surprise you. He approached death as he lived, drunk, with merry good humor, making everyone around him uncomfortable. David Hartman interviewed the pair, regarding Moon in particular, with barely concealed disdain.
Are you in control of your life at all? Oh, yeah, certain days.
Certain days.
Yeah.
Moon also revealed that he enjoyed being out on the road very much, and he opined that he hadn't changed a bit in 15 years. The drummer wound up by plugging the August 21st release date to the band's classic album, Who Are You? He died on September 7th. When Keith Alston of NME sat down to interview Jimi Hendrix on September 11, 1970, there was no way he could possibly know that he was recording the final public statement of a guitar legend. If he had, he probably would have asked much more interesting questions. Instead, Alston asked Hendrix a bunch of fluff about the UK music scene, whether he really deserved his rep as a guitarist, and whether he liked money. Alston refrained from asking even a single question that would be of interest to the king of all guitars after his death, but Hendrix answered each question as completely and thoughtfully as possible. The interviewer did at least allude to Hendrix's suggestion that classical music would be informing his next album to a greater degree, which sounds fascinating enough. But that's about all that's fascinating. The interview wrapped up with Alston extracting the scintillating insight from Hendrix that he would perhaps like an indoor pool one day. Alice in Chains lead singer Lane Staley's addiction to drugs has never been much of a secret. Take, for example, the biography Lane Staley, Angry Chair, a look inside the heart and soul of an incredible musician. The book contains a section detailing the singer's final interview just months before his death, and it's clear that Staley knew both that the end was nigh and that it was all down to his own terrible decisions. Staley admitted, "I know I'm dying. I'm not doing well. I'm not using drugs to get high like many people think. I know I made a big mistake when I started using this shit. It's a very difficult thing to explain. The pain is more than you can handle. It's the worst pain in the world." Staley bitterly lamented his lost fight, saying, "I invested a lot of money on treatments. I know I did my best and what I thought would be right. I changed my number. I don't want to see people anymore, and it's nobody's business but mine." Cobain seemed to be in a good place during what is thought to be his last interview with the prolific Canadian journalist known as Nardwuar a few months before his death. The interview was caught on video, allowing us to witness Cobain, his wife Courtney Love, and his bandmates all chowing down on pizza as Nardwuar slings inane questions at them.
Did you really custom design a guitar, your own special little model?
Yeah.
How many models were there, and can I buy one?
Many of Cobain's responses are kind of difficult to ascertain, as they're given through mouthfuls of pizza. In fact, everyone was in a great mood. Nothing of substance was asked or learned. And Nardwuar was basically treated like the geeky dude trying to hang out with the cool kids. And to be fair, that's because he kinda was. It's actually rather comforting to see Cobain at such relative peace, which also appeared to be the case during his final print interview, published in Rolling Stone. A particular note, when asked in that interview just how literal the song I Hate Myself and I Want to Die was, Cobain replied, "As literal as a joke can be, nothing more than a joke. That pretty much defines our band. It's both those contradictions. It's satirical and it's serious at the same time."